Well, now we have a welcome from Susan Brown.
Hi, this is Susan Brown. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Planning and Accountability at the Coordinating Board. And I just wanted to say we really appreciate all the work that is being done on this for these groups, for these guidelines. We have also been working with the Texas Association of Community Colleges, and they are following these guidelines very closely on what comes out of these discussions so that they can maybe take this a step further if their presidents, all the presidents agree to that. So I wanted to say that people are looking at what you're doing and are very interested in the outcomes of the meetings. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule because we know everybody is very busy, especially this time of year.
Okay. Well, most people were here at the first meeting of the first college level course stakeholder advisory group, but we also have a few new people. And so I'm going to first start with a very brief overview of what the first college level course measure is, to give a little bit background, and then we'll talk about the proposal and the feedback that we got and what we're now proposing. Okay.
And Jenna, I just want to mention we had someone say they were having difficulty hearing you, so I have pulled the microphone closer, and I'm going to just say this out loud. So if our folks who are working the IT have a way to turn up the sound a little bit, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
I think now that it's moved closer, that's probably better. Okay, first college level courses. There are 3 critical skill areas that we measure. These are reading, writing, and math. And we use the first college level course measure to compare students who are college ready and those who are not college ready at the point that they enter college. And we have 3 developmental education measures. The first measure is completing a first college level course in a skill area. And for students who are college ready at the point that they enter, they're given 1 year to complete a first college level course in each of those subject areas. For students who are not college ready when they enter, they're given 3 years. And this allows these students to go through the developmental education coursework or interventions and then become college ready and go on to take a first college level course.
And Jana, I just want to interject here and say, when we say they're given 1 year, that means that we track for 1 year and show how many students in a year's time have completed that first college level course. So I just wanted to be clear that this is related to the measure, how long we track for. So if a student who comes in college ready meets the standard, completes a first college level course within 1 year, then that we record that and that's included in the measure as a completion. And a student who's not ready, we allow 3 years.
Okay, and there are 2 other measures, but they're not really relevant for this discussion. But they are meeting TSI within 2 years for students who are not college ready at the point that they enter, and we also look at 1 year persistence for both groups. Okay, so first college level course is a measure. Why do we use? Why do we have this measure? Well, it provides information about whether readiness standards are appropriate. So it actually does many things, but that's one of them. So we look at students who are college ready or who meet TSI upon entry and whether they successfully complete a first college level course. And we would expect if they are college ready at the point that they enter, if our TSI levels are appropriate, then the majority of students will complete this first college level course. So that's one way that this measure is helpful. It lets us look at our TSI standards. But another way that it is very helpful is that it provides information about whether developmental education courses and interventions adequately prepare students for first college level coursework. And for first college level courses for reporting, currently institutions have to report completion of a first college level course in each subject area, so reading, writing, and math. And currently, institutions have discretion in selecting what courses count. Guidelines. In the past, during the TASP initiative, the coordinating board published a list of first college level courses. And even now, some institutions still use that list, and that's been quite a while. But the coordinating board does not currently publish guidelines. So why do we need guidelines now? Well, it's frequently requested by institutions. It really may help promote equity and shared understanding. And at community colleges, success points, because first college level course, that measure is a part of the success point calculation.
And I will add here that for success points, institutions receive 1 point for students who successfully complete the first college level math course and a half point each for the reading and writing courses.
Okay, and here you can see what institutions actually report, but I'm not going to really spend time on this slide. I think. But this next slide shows you an example of the reports. These are available on the coordinating board website, where you can look at how students who are college ready and those who are not, at the point that they enter, how they compare on the different measures. And in this case, you can see the first college level course measure.
Right, and I'll just add that it's available on the Texas Higher Education Data website. You can reach that through the main website, or you can go to www.txhighereddata.org, and then you can select the TSI measures that are listed under participation and success.
And all of that information was in that first packet that we sent back to institutions, but we will also include it when we send a follow-up to this webinar.
Yeah, and I also want to include that the accountability measures, that these measures are included in our accountability system. So we have the measures available with the developmental education data all the way through right now 2011 tracked forward, but our accountability system includes the developmental education measures, and that information is provided to institutional board members and presidents, and of course is available online. The measures are also included in our higher education almanac. So these are pretty visible measures.
And probably go all the way.
Okay.
Okay. So as we started looking at establishing guidelines for first college level course, we established the stakeholder advisory group, and then we met in August. It's been quite a while now. And at that meeting, we had, I think, close to 70 people. And we had representatives from universities, Lamar State College, TSTC, community colleges. We had developmental ed faculty, academic course faculty, a range of disciplines. So we had a lot of input at that meeting. And then based on that, we created a draft proposal, and then we requested feedback. So we took all of the input that we got from that meeting, and we actually created a proposal. So we tried to synthesize what we got, and felt that was the best way to provide institutions with something then to comment on. We sent it back to the advisory group on September 9th. We also sent the proposal out to agency staff and requested their feedback as well. And so now we're going to talk about the proposal and then the feedback we got and what we are now proposing. So for the proposed guidelines for reading and writing, because I want to clarify that with the reading and writing, it looks quite a bit different from the math. So that's why you're going to see proposed guidelines for reading and writing. We do have guidelines for math, but they look a little different. So what we're talking about here is specific for the reading and writing. Some courses we are proposing will automatically count as first college level courses in a subject area, meaning if an institution is teaching that course, we're going to assume that it will work as a first college level course for that subject area. And we've got the specification that courses must be at least 3 semester credit hours to count as a first college level course. So, and what you're seeing here on this page is exactly what was sent in that original proposal back to institutions for review. And then we talk about institutional documentation. Institutions should maintain a list of courses that they are using for first college level courses. And we would also expect that syllabi that the institutions post would reflect the criteria that we've established for these first college level courses. So let's go.
Okay. And Jana, as we move forward through these proposals, would you like folks to just break in if they have questions, or is there a certain point in time? So maybe we'll pause at the end pause at various points and just ask the field, are there any questions at this point in time? Okay, then we'll move to the next slide.
So here's where we really get, I think, into the heart of the proposal. And I did want to clarify a few things that I think came out of some of the feedback that we got. We're proposing really 3 categories of courses. Courses that always count, and there are very few of these in reading or writing. Courses that count if they meet the criteria, and we have courses that are specifically listed and those that are not specifically listed, and then courses that cannot be used. So the courses that will always count, this particular case, this is where we look to the learning outcomes in the ACGM. And that was one of the main reasons that we looked at those learning outcomes, because if we see evidence that in those learning outcomes that reading or writing will be met, then we can always count that course, because we can assume that that course is intensive for reading and writing. For courses that count if they meet criteria, these are courses that are likely to meet the criteria, but there can be some variation across institutions. And so institutions need to review their own syllabi, their courses that they teach, and decide, yes, it meets, no, it doesn't. And beyond that, the institutions don't have to do any additional documentation. They just have to review the courses and make that determination, and they can put the course on the list. So there's not a great deal of difference between courses that always count and courses that are on the list that will count after institutional review. So there's not an additional amount of work beyond that. There's no additional requirement for justification. And then there are courses not specifically listed. These are the courses that the institutions need to keep some documentation justifying the use of that course as a first college level course. So that's where that additional documentation would come into play.
Again, Jenna, I think in that case, that a review would probably be warranted at the institution, maybe with faculty involved, that when you're, or the level of review, certainly if just the syllabi must be used for courses that can count after review, that level of review is probably not going to be as intensive as courses that are not included on one of the lists that the institution is going to be looking at and thinking about making a determination. So I think in many cases that would probably involve a more intensive review and some kind of a situation where there would be faculty input that would be important.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I also wanted to make one additional clarification about the purpose of establishing guidelines. We're hoping to assist institutions in selecting courses to report, but it's not a part of this effort to propose changes or additions to courses or to learning outcomes in the ACGM. Now, you may feel that we need these kinds of changes, and if so, you can work with your representatives on the various committees and work through that, but it's not a part of this effort.
Thank you. And I think one of the reasons that we wanted to be clear about that is we did have several comments come back from institutions that suggested changes to courses in the ACGM or the WECM, or other types of changes in terms of looking at learning outcomes. And we wanted to make it clear that that is not the role of this group, but we will certainly pass along any comments that folks have to the committees who are responsible for those types of reviews.
So are there any questions or comments so far about these three different categories or how this process would work? Okay, then let's go on to the criteria for reading. So for reading, the proposal for, and this came directly from the stakeholder advisory group, that, and they drew from the Texas Career and College Readiness Standards and selected the following criteria: that students locate textual information, draw inferences, describe, analyze, and evaluate textual information. Students comprehend and use vocabulary to communicate effectively. Students identify, analyze audience, purpose, and message. Students describe, imply insights gained from reading, and students connect reading to historical and current events and personal interests. So that was the criteria that came out, and that was what was put into our original proposal that we sent out. So now, what was the feedback that we got? We specifically requested whether a minimum amount of or type of reading should be required. And we received some diverse responses here, several suggestions related to specifying reading a range of texts or a range of rhetorical modes. And we also received several comments that the type of reading depends on the course and should not be specified beyond what was initially proposed in the criteria. So we didn't get overwhelming response to change that criteria.
Do we have any comments here? Because we had two different types of suggestions here. One that we be more specific about the range of texts, and one that we leave it open. And these are key points, because I think with some of the suggestions for specificity, it would limit the courses, the types of courses that could be used, and I think we would need to go back and reevaluate those. So are there any comments in that area? Okay, it's a quiet group, or we're not coming through. Thank you. Then we will move forward with this. Can I at least ask for any suggestions whether folks think we should choose one, or we should leave both of these options here for the next round of comments, so that people can give us additional feedback here, or if there's any kind of consensus in terms of where we should be going forward in terms of this issue, in terms of criteria. And Jana, I don't know if you could give a couple of examples in terms of when they wanted the specificity. I think people were talking about fiction and academic essays, and there was a range of suggestions, poetry and prose. Some of them sounded like they really were coming out of an English text and might not be the types of different types of reading that you'd have in something like a history course.
Well, and some of them look like it would be more found in a reading course. So in a reading course, you might expect students who are actually studying reading to read different types of texts, whereas in some of the comments we got, that's too narrow, so that in a history course where students might not read literary text. So I think that was the sort of the discussion that we were hearing or getting in the feedback, that there were two different ways of approaching it. And one looked more, would be more suitable to courses that were teaching reading as a skill, where the other, when we look at courses that use reading just as a mode of learning or a means of learning, might have a more limited range in the types of text they actually use for that course. Does that make
Yes,
sense?
I think that makes a lot of sense, and that reflects some of the staff discussion, certainly, that we had regarding that. And I think it's also important throughout this process for us to keep going back to the purpose of the first college-level course measure, and that's for, it's a way to measure whether a student was, in fact, ready to perform in a college-level course that included, in this case, intensive reading. Did they have the preparation needed, perhaps the preparation through that type of reading course if they needed developmental education that had a range of reading, or through the work that they did in high school? Did they have the preparation they needed to be successful in a course that had a large amount of reading? So again, that I think the general staff sense was that the second criteria, leaving it open so that a broader range of courses could be included, I think it was our sense that was a better approach that didn't lead necessarily down the path to English courses or courses that look like reading courses, or that where people would feel like they needed to structure them as if they were teaching reading, as opposed to courses that would reflect that students had strong reading skills and were able to handle the material in the course. And I would, if there's any feedback at this point, are people comfortable with us selecting the second option? I see one yes from a participant that's here. Anyone who's listening in like to second that idea that we will use the second bullet in our next version of the draft proposals?
I second that.
Thank you.
And one thing to think about, I think in terms of this, there was almost, I think, unanimous support for history being a first college-level course in reading. But history may not involve as much of the literary types of texts. And so by requiring sort of a range of texts or rhetorical modes or styles of writing or literary writing, that might end the use of history, or it might conflict with it. So just something to consider.
Okay, well, I will ask the other question. Is there anyone who would like to make a case for maintaining those ranges, maintaining a range of texts and rhetorical modes as part of the criteria for a reading course? Great, thank you very much. Okay.
Okay, the next area we're going to look at are the actual proposed list of courses. So this is what was sent out, again, in the original proposal: courses that will always count: history, government, psychology, sociology, and you can see the rest. Courses that will count if they meet the criteria: English 1301 or 1302 or university equivalent, literature, art, music, appreciation, and then a few courses that cannot be used, courses in art and music other than those listed above, or foreign language courses. And then again, if we have the open case where institutions who wish to use a course that's not on the list, they can do so if they review the courses and just maintain justification for the use of that course, that it meets the criteria and they feel that it's appropriate. Yes, this is the original proposal that was sent out on September, whatever it was. 9th, okay. So the next page. So to look at some of the feedback that we got. One of the key things that we heard back from was that, there's variation on what courses have a reading, met TSI and reading requirement for entry into the courses. And so we felt that that was a very useful thing to hear, and meeting TSI in the subject area, we really do feel should be required for a course that's going to count as a first college level course in that subject area. So that was very helpful feedback. But then we asked specifically about a couple of kinds of courses, speech and communication courses, and we actually didn't hear much in response to this. The one response we did hear was that it probably would not have enough, it probably would not meet that criteria for most courses in that area. Now, learning frameworks. We had diverse responses. Most institutions felt that these courses should count, though, as a first college level course in reading. But we're going to discuss this separately because there are some other issues with the first college level, with the learning frameworks courses as first college level courses. And then we ask about science courses, including biology, physics, and chemistry, and should these courses be allowed as first college level courses in reading? And again, there was a mixed response. Most institutions seem to indicate that they felt it should not be. I'm sorry, that it should count, yes. And then other feedback, literature courses should always count. English 1301 and 1302 should always count. Although I did want to discuss those particularly, I think from our first meeting with the stakeholders, universities often in their English courses, their 1301 or 1302 or equivalent, may not have enough of the reading for it to count as a reading requirement or to be reading intensive. So they may have courses that focus far more on the writing. So these courses are allowable. They're on the list. So if institutions are teaching them and they meet that reading criteria, they're fine to use. And there's no additional documentation necessary. But we did not put it on that always count, category because of that, because there is some variation in the way that the writing courses or English 1301 or 1302 are taught. And literature courses may be film courses for at least at universities. So that's also why it's not in that always counted category. But they probably will be acceptable for most courses, but institutions do need to look at their courses and make that decision.
Yes, and I just want to take a moment to talk a little bit about the science courses to make sure everyone is on the same page with those courses. And it was actually very helpful to get this feedback because I think there are arguments on both sides for science courses, and we appreciate that everyone took the time to talk about it. Certainly when we talk about science courses, these would be courses where the institution would need to provide justification, would need to talk with faculty, carefully look at syllabi, and understand what the reading component is for these particular courses as decisions were made. So I wanted to make it clear, first of all, that I don't think anyone was saying these should always count, but I think they were saying there might be instances at an institution where a science course would be appropriate. Certainly there can be some very intensive and high-level reading required for science courses. And again, on the other side, I think we also need to go back to the initial purpose of these measures, and that's to determine if a student who was determined to be TSI ready in a particular area, math, reading, or writing, was ready for the next college-level course that would tie back to that area. And so I'm not going to make an argument either way or say that we need to make a decision at this point. I just wanted to make sure that if anyone had any additional comment about the math and science courses, that they had an opportunity to do so now, and that we did open it up for discussion on those courses.
So are there any other comments, questions here?
Okay, so I sense that everyone is in agreement then that for now we will leave those science courses there. Again, we did have some mixed responses and some folks that said no, but for the proposal that we're going to put forward, I'm sensing that people agree that that the science courses should be included in that proposal. Well, again, this will be taken to the next level and taken to institutional leadership. We will include them, but as courses that will have to go through the more intensive review process before they're included in the first college level course list. Great, thank you.
Okay, now we're going to talk a little about learning frameworks. So, learning frameworks are particularly, I think they bring up some critical issues, and so there are possible problems in using as a first college level course for reading or writing. Learning frameworks are a special type of course. There's very little standardization at this point across institutions, and we're concerned that it may skew the first college level course as a measure for developmental ed and could result in inequity, and that may particularly affect success points. This is because the institutions that, at least some institutions that implement learning frameworks, require all students to take them at the point that they enter. Although then, for students, when we require TSI to be a requirement for taking those courses, that could potentially create a conflict. But also, there are many new initiatives involving learning frameworks courses, part of more general support for first-year students. And a first college level course measure could also help to serve as a measure for the learning frameworks courses. So what we're really proposing is that we don't want to make a decision with this at this time, that it really needs to, that we need to have further study before we decide one way or another. Would you like to add anything?
And I think Janet actually covered it very well, but one of the things that we worry about is exactly what she said, where all students that come into an institution are required to take a learning frameworks course, whether or not they are TSI complete or in any area. And they use it mainly as here's how to study, here's how to do these things. So being able to count that as a first college level course when it's required of everybody, whether they're TSI exempt or TSI ready, at this point just didn't make a lot of sense to us. So that is something that we can continue to study, but calling that a college level when you're requiring of students that are not college level didn't make sense to the coordinating board at this time.
And the other piece I want to add as a researcher, and Janet touched on this also, and I think it's important, is if institutions are using learning frameworks courses to help students be successful in their college level courses, you're really using a course that is designed to prepare students to be successful in their other courses. If that's used as a first college level course, when it's something that's really to prepare students for those college level courses, then in terms of the information that we are able to gather, it could be very confusing to analyze, to understand what this first college level course measure for reading is telling us. And I think if more and more people start doing learning frameworks types of courses, I think it could be an excellent, the first college level course, if we don't include learning frameworks, it would be an excellent way to measure whether those programs are successful, to see how students are doing then when they reach the first college level courses, when they're taking the academic reading and writing courses. And I fully understand, and I can, I probably hear some of the comments in the background that learning frameworks course is in the ACGM. It is an academic college course for which students receive credit. We understand that there is academic learning frameworks, theoretical models, those types of materials in that course, and necessarily so because it is a college credit course. But because of the variation we've seen in how institutions are using this course and offering this course, it did seem important to take a little more time on our end to understand who's offering it, what students are taking it, those types of things, and to get your feedback from around the state for how it's being used. In some cases, people, I think, have it in core. In some cases, not. There really is a lot of variability. Sometimes it's simply an elective that a student can choose to take, and we see small numbers at an institution doing it. So we want to try to better understand that. And
we really would welcome your feedback, regardless of how learning frameworks courses are implemented at your institution, or if they're not, used at all. So please kind of take a look at what we've presented here and let us know what your thoughts are.
And I think we probably, when we talk about further study, we may ask for volunteers from institutions and from this group to come forward to create kind of a smaller group to have discussions about these courses. We want to make sure we hear from the folks who are using the Learning Frameworks courses in different types of ways before we make this decision. So if you'd like to volunteer to be part of that, I guess I should finish it up with that. Feel free to send an email and let us know.
Are there any comments or questions at this point before we go further?
No, I'm just thinking. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm thinking about the Learning Frameworks course being a co-requisite with our our reading course, one of our reading courses, so they're not TSI ready. And so therefore, tell me how that then works, funding per.
Okay, they can still, I believe, still get funded for that course. This is different from the funding. The
Okay.
reading course, if they complete that reading course, and that is a first college level reading course, then the reading course counts as their first college level course.
For the half point.
Right, for the half point, for the momentum points.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
And we did have an email from someone that was having audio problems. Is there anyone else out there who's having trouble hearing us? And perhaps if you're having trouble hearing us, you didn't hear the question, but if anyone's having trouble hearing the broadcast, please break in and let us know. We'll try harder to stay focused on our microphones.
Do you want to repeat the question and response?
Okay, the question was that if you have a Learning Frameworks course that is a co-requisite for students that may or may not have met their reading TSI, and it's a co-requisite with a reading course, how is that funded? The first college level course doesn't determine the funding. However, what would happen is you would get funded for the Learning Frameworks course. You would also get funded for the reading course. If that reading course was one of your first college level courses, then the reading course is what would count for completing first college level reading. And you would get the half point for the momentum points. So I hope everybody was able to hear that and follow it.
Yeah, and reading course, it could be a history course, it could be English 1301, whatever you're using for the first college level reading.
That first college level,
Yeah.
Yes.
I think so. So here's what we are proposing as a draft revision to our original draft proposal. Right. We propose to add TSI reading requirement for first college level courses that can be used for reading. But no additional changes to the criteria for what counts as a first college level course in reading. And then in the list of courses, we do have a few changes. We're proposing moving geography, right, down to courses that will count if they meet criteria. And then proposing changing art history, changing that around at the bottom where it becomes art and music history courses can count if they meet the criteria, and other courses in art and music than those identified would not be allowed. And I believe there are no other changes that we are proposing in that draft before we send it out for further review.
And I did want to add, I was just taking another look at the comments. We did have someone bring up theater, so we could have art, music, or theater history courses. And unless we hear any objections, we'll add that in. I think we intended to, and it didn't.
Yes.
It didn't make it into this version, so it would be art, music, or theater history courses. We could even say fine arts history courses. Yeah.
And we would like any comments you have here on these. Does that sound reasonable to you?
I do want to make one comment related to TSI, and probably our developmental education staff is listening to this webinar, at least I hope they are. We, as Jenna mentioned, we did get feedback from some institutions that there are some courses such as government or sociology where they're not requiring students to meet TSI to take the course. We are not condoning that practice. We are not saying that that's an appropriate thing to do with these guidelines. When we say it has to be a course where the student there is a TSI expectation for that course. So I think it's important, if you do have courses that are freshman level academic courses, which is the terminology used in the TSI statute, that you look very carefully at those courses if you are not requiring students to meet TSI. I don't want to get into detail about that, but it did make us a little bit uncomfortable when we had institutions write and say, hey, we don't require TSI for some of these courses. So if they are courses in the ACGM that are freshman level academic courses, it's probably important for your institution to take a look at that. But because we understand that sometimes there are some courses that perhaps the majority of the folks think that TSI would be appropriate. There might be some where there's a different decision made. We want to make sure that we got that into the proposal, but I just wanted to make it clear that this does not mean the coordinating board is saying it's that we agree that some of those other courses shouldn't have a TSI liability attached.
Okay, then.
Okay.
All right, then what's next? Our next steps. What we're going to do is send out the revised proposal, and we'll send it out first to the advisory group for any additional comments. And especially if you were not comfortable giving feedback here during this webinar, please send us any feedback you have immediately, but then we will send out the revised proposal for another round of feedback from the group. And then after we receive that feedback, we incorporate it, we plan to send the proposal out more broadly.
Jenna, I'm going to make a suggestion and see if anyone in the field agrees, because we did have the questions about the paired courses. Would it be helpful if we build some information about that into the proposal? Because I think other people might have those questions where if we're saying you have to meet TSI, but then we're saying, hey, if you're in a paired course with, for example, English 1301 and some kind of developmental English, that you can still use that English 1301 to meet TSI. Would it be helpful to put some clarification in for that? Because I think by introducing that TSI requirement, it could be confusing, and there is some gray area there, but we'll go ahead and try to, and I'm seeing some nods here, and I think in the field, we'll go ahead and try to include some explanation of that piece for the next version.
Yes, I think that's a really good idea. Are there any other questions, comments?
Did anyone send comments that we didn't address that they wanted to raise again? We tried to cover the ones that we were hearing from several people or we thought were important to include, but we want to make sure if anyone did send comments and we didn't include enough specificity related to those comments, or you didn't see it included anywhere in the presentation today, feel free to raise those issues now.
Do you think this process has been helpful or will be helpful to you or your institution?
Okay, I have one more question. The success points, I'm back, for some reason this is still lingering. we now have the INRW courses, or integrated reading and writing?
Correct.
Okay. So those will count as
1 full point.
1 full point.
Because you count them, you would be reporting them as first college level reading and first college level writing.
And we will
Same
focus,
course.
but how will we determine? Oh, I see. So it will be reading and writing?
If they meet the criteria for both, because you have that integrated reading and writing,
Right.
so they would meet the criteria for both of these things,
Okay.
then you would count them, when you report your TSI report, they would be considered the first college level reading and the first college level writing course.
Okay.
And then you would get a full point.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'm not sure, some of you may be less familiar with the integrated reading and writing, because we've got, I know, academic faculty who may be less familiar with that. In the developmental education areas, there is an initiative to utilize integrated reading and writing developmental education courses. So the course addresses both reading and writing within one course. And so institutions, there's the meeting TSI success point, and so an integrated reading and writing course would count for both reading and writing. On the first college level course side, courses may be a reading course, they may be a writing course, or some courses are both. So we have that on both sides of the spectrum. And so when institutions report first college level courses, in the reporting manual, they have to say whether a course was the first college level course in reading, in writing, or if it was reading, writing intensive, so that it counted for both. I hope that helps clarify. Is there anything else? Because that is really what we have for this meeting. Okay. We've got one more slide. It's contact information. And this is also on all of the information that I think we've provided you, but you have our contact information, so we welcome feedback. We will send a follow-up email from this meeting that will have what we've said that we would send, and it will also have all the contact information and the revised proposal and anything else that we can find to send you.
Okay, and don't forget, if you are interested in being part of that smaller study group to look at the Learning Frameworks courses, do send us an email with that information.
Okay, and then to give you to let you know what's going on the rest of the day, we have the session for writing will be next, and that will happen at 11. So we will be back here at 11 for the writing and 1:30 for the math. So you're welcome to come back and attend either or both of those sessions.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to begin in just a moment. If everyone can put their phones on mute, if they have not already, we'll begin the webinar. Thank you all very much for joining us. I know many of you were probably with us earlier this morning for the first college level course guideline meeting related to reading intensive courses. We will now address writing intensive courses. Let me move forward, and first I want to talk a little bit about the webinar, and then I'll introduce the speakers for today. The conference call line is available in the handouts that we sent you, and it should be up on screen now. If you have any issues, you'll see at the bottom of this slide, please email them to me and to Jana Cosert. It's probably easier to email them to me. I have a computer here and ready, and that worked the best during the last session. I am Julie Eklund. And it's julie.eklund@thecb.state.tx.us. The conference call number is there. We are recording the webinar, so if there are folks who weren't able to join us, they will be able to listen back. And of course, keep that in mind as you are making comments, because we are also broadcasting the webinar. And again, it's important to keep your phone on mute. Do not put it on hold. That causes problems in terms of us getting some music and those types of things coming back to us here. If you would like to speak, and again, this is all about getting your feedback, feel free to take your phone off hold at any point in time and ask a question. And it is helpful to us if you state your name and your institution when you ask a question. Okay, so with us today, we have Jana Cossert, who is going to be leading the majority of the webinar, and she is a program director in the planning section in Planning and Accountability here at the Coordinating Board. We also have Susan Brown with us. She is the Assistant Commissioner for Planning and Accountability at the Coordinating Board. And again, I am Julie Eklund, and I am Deputy Assistant Commissioner in Planning and Accountability. So I'm going to turn it over to Susan for a welcome.
Thank you. And I do want to let you know that the work that y'all are doing with this group is very important. This is something that we have been asked for multiple times by the institutions. Also, especially with the success points coming into play for the community colleges, there has been a lot of discussions about the consistency across campuses and the need to make sure that everybody is counting things the same way. And this will be very helpful. Also, TAC is looking at this to make sure that everybody is doing the same thing, so that when they move forward with the success points going into the making recommendations for the 16-17 biennium, that we're kind of smoothing out some of the issues that we may have had with the first set and making sure everything is moving along clearly. And we really appreciate all your work and want to make sure that you understand that we do take this seriously, even though these are guidelines, that there are a lot of people that are looking at these, and we are hoping that this is going to be very useful, not only at the state level, but also at the school level, at the institution level. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. We are going to begin with a short summary of why we're here. Some of this will be a little repetitive for those of you who were with us earlier today for the reading group, and I think we probably have some new folks and some people who weren't with us for the initial meeting. So we do want to take a couple minutes for an overview, and then of course we will spend the bulk of the presentation talking about the proposed guidelines and the feedback that we've received for those thus far. So I'm going to turn it over to Jana for the next segment.
Okay, good morning. First, talk a little bit about first college level courses and our measures. So in the first college level course, we're really looking at 3 critical skill areas: reading, writing, and math. And for the first college level course, we compare students who are college ready with those who are not college ready. And so we look at the completion rates for first college level courses in each of those subject areas. And when we do this for accountability, we look at, we look at students who are college ready. When they enter college, we give them 1 year, and we look at the rate at which they complete a first college level course in that subject area, and that's successfully complete, so they have to make an A, B, or C. And we compare that to students who are not college ready when they enter, so that they need developmental education before they're ready to take a first college level course, and we look at the rate at which they complete a first college level course. And for these students, we give them 3 years to give them time to complete that cycle of developmental ed. And so that is the measure that we're really looking at for the first college level course. We have 2 other accountability measures for developmental education: meeting TSI within 2 years for students who are not college ready. And the third measure is the 1-year persistence rate. And for this, we look at both students who are college ready when they enter and those who are not. So what is the use of first college level course as a measure? Well, it provides us information across several dimensions. First, it provides us information about whether our readiness standards are appropriate, and that's especially when we look at the completion rates for first college level course for students who are ready at the point that they enter. So we would expect or hope that students who are college ready when they enter institutions would be able to successfully complete a first college level course. And so that's what the measure gives us. It lets us look at our standards for readiness. If we find many students not being able to complete first college level courses, maybe our measures or maybe our TSI standards are not set at the right level. But it also provides us information specific to developmental ed. And that's when we look at, when we compare students who are college ready and those who are not. And see how, at what rates each group completes a first college level course. So institutions report first college level courses for each subject area. And currently, institutions have discretion in selecting what courses count. And currently, we have no set guidelines. In the past, when TASP was in effect, the coordinating board published a list of first college level courses that institutions could use. And even now, some institutions are still using that list, but we do not currently publish any guidelines.
Janet, I just want to add here, we did have one comment come in, and through the comment period, someone was asking if these are requirements or guidelines. And at this point in time, these are just going to be guidelines for institutions. They will not be required to follow them, though as Susan mentioned earlier, I think there's a lot of interest, at least at the community college level, in these guidelines. And if should there be guidelines developed that everyone agreed upon for the community colleges, they may move past the point of being guidelines. But right now, we're just looking at guidelines. Certainly for universities, these are guidelines that we would establish to help institutions with reporting first college level courses.
And so what are the what's the need for these guidelines? Well, one, it's frequently requested by institutions. So we do get a lot of requests. Do you have a list? Do you have any kind of guidelines? Also, to create equity and shared understanding. What do we really mean by first college level courses? And hopefully that will be answered with this with these guidelines that we create. But also another issue that's very important is the success points at community colleges, and that really students or institutions get success points for students who complete a first college level course. Do you want to talk a little about that? The success points.
Oops, let me turn my mic on. The success points for the first college level writing and then those integrated courses is that when you do an integrated course and it meets the standards for first college level reading and first college level writing, what you can do is that course will count for both. So basically you would get a full point, success point, for that course because it does count as the reading and the writing course at the same time.
Right. And there is 1 point for math, and if someone is taking separate reading and writing courses, it's
a half
5
point
points.
for
It's a half point for each.
Half point for each of them.
And that's actually a question that came up at the earlier session. And we have another question here from someone in the audience.
And if a student is placed into an ABE course, which will now be part of the developmental student success program, will that count under the 2-year program, or will that count as some momentum?
Until they complete DevEd,
Okay.
they would not be getting a success point. At all.
Okay, so no matter where the student starts, when
Right.
they finish that
When they
DevEd
finish,
sequence.
when they finish and they are considered completed for developmental ed purposes, that is when they would get a point.
And we call those success points.
Success points.
Right, and there's actually, for developmental education, there's points for students who complete developmental education and are considered TSI ready, and that's when the point comes, that the first points come in when they're TSI ready, and you can get a point for math and half a point for reading and writing for the TSI ready, but then there are also additional points awarded when that student moves forward and completes a first college level course. So there's a point for a first college level math course and a half a point for a first college level reading and a half a point for a first college level writing course. And just as Susan discussed with the developmental education integrated reading and writing, points can be earned for that in terms of meeting TSI. For students who complete TSI, they can get half a point for reading, half a point for writing. For students who successfully complete a first college level course that falls under the reading and the writing category, the student can get a full point, whereas if there's a course that just counts for first college level reading, a half a point is awarded. If it just counts for first college level writing, a half a point is awarded. So basically, we will have situations, because as you know, some courses are reading and writing intensive. We will have situations where the course will apply to both, and institutions are allowed to report a course for both reading and writing, and that's built into our manual. Okay. You're welcome. Any other questions about success points while we're discussing those related to the first college level course? Okay, we'll move on then.
Okay, and this page just shows you what institutions actually report for first college level courses. And you can note that students have to complete an A, B, or C in the course to get credit. And a course can be either a math course, a reading course, a writing course, reading intensive, writing intensive, or it can be both, reading and writing intensive. So institutions have to select this, and they report it into us on the CBM OOS.
And one thing I want to mention, just because we happen to have an email from a reporting official earlier during the reading session, so I think there might be some reporting officials who have decided to listen in, and we did have a few reporting officials on our stakeholder advisory group. One thing that's important to understand is only one first college level course in math, one in reading and one in writing, or of course the reading and writing come together, will be included for the success points moving forward. So if we would prefer if institutions just report one first college level course for a student, and I believe that's in the instructions, but we have had some issues with reporting there, and we will work with reporting officials to clarify that and make sure we're collecting that information correctly. But I did want to take this opportunity to say that students, if someone completes 5 courses that are reading intensive, the institution is not going to receive 5 points for that student. The student would just be marked for 1, which would be considered the first.
Okay, and these next slides we'll move through pretty quickly, but these show you an example of the developmental education measures and how we put these in reports. And so these reports were in the packets that we sent you. We gave them out at the very first meeting that we had, but we'll also include links to them. But you can see how students compare, students who are college ready and at the point that they enter, and those who need DevEd, how they compare in completing a first college level course in each of the subject areas.
And I believe Jana told me we have sent the link to where these reports can be found online, and these measures are also part of our higher education accountability system, so the data can be found there. But with the reports that are online, you can see students tracked for 1 year, 2 years, and then 3 years for these measures. So that's why we included the 3 different reports, and there are specific reports for each institution available, as well as statewide reports that group the community colleges together, the TSTCs and Lamar State Colleges and the universities.
And when we send a follow-up to this meeting, we will also include that same information about those links. Okay. When we began to develop guidelines for the first college level course, we established a stakeholder advisory group and met in August. And at that meeting, we had, I think, close to 70 people. We had a wide range of representation. We had people from universities, Lamar State colleges, TSTCs, community colleges. We had developmental ed faculty, academic course faculty, a range of disciplines. So we had a lot of input at that meeting. And then following that meeting, we received feedback from the meeting. We received feedback following the meeting. We synthesized the input that we had into a draft proposal because we felt that that would be the best way for institutions to then respond. Rather than responding on our interpretation or our documentation of the feedback, to respond to an integration or a synthesis of that feedback. We sent that proposal out on September 9th, and then we also sent it to agency staff here for comment. And so now we're going to look at the proposal that we sent out. In this first page, this is exactly what was sent in that original proposal, and it's guidelines that specifically work for reading and writing. Math is a separate case, and that'll be discussed separately, but these guidelines really work with both reading and writing. And what we say is that what we've tried to identify certain courses that will count as first college level courses in a given subject area. But there are going to be other cases where institutions need to review a course to see if it does fit. And any course that counts needs to be at least 3 credit hours. And then just a note about the documentation. We did ask institutions to maintain a list of courses that they identify as first college level courses. That's what we're proposing. And then if a course is not on the list, but it does meet the criteria, we ask that institutions will maintain documentation justifying the use of that course. And we propose 3 categories of courses for first college level courses that will always count. We just know if that course is taught, it will be a reading course, a reading intensive course or a writing intensive course. And there are very, very few of those. And then courses that will count if they meet criteria. And there are 2 cases. Some we will specifically list, and we expect an institution simply to review their syllabi and determine if it meets the criteria. Then it can count as a first college level course. And then also courses that are not specifically listed. Again, institutions can use them if they review and find that the course meets the criteria. But these are the ones that we would expect an institution to document with the justification for its use. And I did want to make a few points about clarifying what the purpose of this sort of whole larger effort is. In establishing these guidelines, we want to assist institutions in selecting what courses to report. But as a part of this, we cannot propose changes or additions to courses or learning objectives. And some of these suggestions may be very good. As institutions, if you feel that we would need changes to learning objectives, you can work with your representatives who are on the ACGM committees or areas like that. But as a part of this particular effort, we're only concerned with selecting from existing courses what can be used as first college level courses in reading and writing.
I was going to say thank you for addressing that, Jana, because as I said earlier, we did have a lot of suggestions, and we haven't included them here because we had a lot of suggestions that would have meant changing the ACGM, either specific courses in the ACGM or changing learning outcomes, also related to the workforce education course manual, suggestions for changes there, and that's not part of the scope of this project, nor is it, again, the scope to change learning outcomes or certain types of policies. So if it was a suggestion that was beyond the scope, we did not include it, but we wanted to make sure to tell you that you are certainly welcome if you think there's there's a role for a change to learning outcomes or ACGM, if there's a role for that to play in regard to first college level courses, you're certainly welcome to either ask us to bring something to those committees that handle that, and those are committees that meet formally on a regular basis, or let us know in some other way that you're interested in getting through to the people who do make those decisions about the courses that are available and their learning outcomes. Thanks.
Well, and I think one of the things that may have led to a little bit of confusion, too, is that we did discuss the ACGM learning outcomes quite a bit. And there was an important role for that, because if in the ACGM learning outcomes we can find evidence that a course meets the criteria for either a first college level course in reading or writing, then we add it to that always counts kind of category. Otherwise, institutions will need to review. So that was really, I think that's the real role that the learning outcomes play in first college level course guidelines. Are there any questions at this point or comments? Okay. Well, let's look at Okay, let's look at the criteria for writing. I skipped a page on my handout. So for the criteria that we first proposed, and this came directly, this is what, again, was in the proposal that we sent out, is that the first college level course in writing is typically English 1301 and 1302. And in the data that we provided you, most institutions, or statewide, when we look statewide, we find most students who are getting a first college level course in writing, they're taking one of those two courses. Right? But there are other courses that can count as a first college level course in writing, and the criteria that the advisory group came up with is that at least 30% of the grade is based on student writing. Now, in the proposal that we sent out, we also ask whether a substantial portion of the writing should be done outside of class or anything else like that requirement. Did we need it? And so the feedback that we got here was, in general, that there was a general response that we should not specify that writing should be done outside of class. And the comments were, in general, that 30% was sufficient, and it really depended on the type of course that a student was in. Some of the other suggestions that we received were that a first college level course in writing students should learn about and use writing techniques, should read and respond to each other's work, students should revise a certain percentage of their writing. Also, that writing should count for 60%. So instead of 60% of the grade should be in writing, or that the course should assess writing. And these all seem to be what would be done typically in English 1301 or 1302. But in other courses, what we're really looking for, I think, is that the course utilizes writing as sort of a means of completing the course. And these seem, and we're not really looking at the course design.
And I think an example of that would be a history course that requires a significant amount of paper writing, but the course is not designed to teach students writing. Yes, do we have a comment, or has someone just joined us? Just heard someone break in. Okay, you might want to mute if you don't have a comment. And we are going to stop at the end of this slide. We're going to stop to have a discussion with all of you. I want to share, when we brought the proposal to staff, we did have a discussion about the role that writing would play in a class for it to be included, especially if we do not include that writing is done outside of class, because we had folks say, well, what if a class is predominantly multiple choice tests, but there are short answers on that test every time, or there are short essays on that test? And what if 30% of the grade is tied to that. Is that sufficient, or should the writing component be a kind of writing that is going to be handed in a separate sort of way, whether it's work that's done in class, out of class, some kind of a paper response where the student isn't in a timed situation, but where they are writing some kind of essay or paper inside class and outside of class? And that is one comment that we'd like to get your feedback on in terms of the first college level writing. If anyone has any comments, feel free to jump in there. Well, yes. Well, let me approach this another way, which we did a few times this morning. If there's anyone in the field who's listening now who feels that it would be acceptable to include any kind of writing at all, including the type of short answer writing I was discussing, if that would be acceptable, and they feel like that should be the 30% should allow that, please let us know now. We'd be interested to know.
Come in.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes. Hi. Do you have a comment about the writing requirement?
Yes. Who is speaking? This is Hui Wu from the University of Texas at Tyler.
Okay.
I think we need to distinguish a writing class from class based on knowledge or content area.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, we've
Sorry
got-
about that. I was like, shit.
Go ahead.
Excuse me, could y'all please, excuse me, could you, if you're not speaking currently, would you please mute your phone? We're getting some overlap and cannot hear the person making the comment. Thank you.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I'm still on. Am I still on?
Yes, now we can all hear you, and we're not getting the background noise.
Okay, thank you. I think the reading and the writing integrated class would be great. However, writing for a class with its own content may not be evaluated as writing skills. However, it would be count toward success in finishing that course. For example, history.
Okay, so basically, yes, are you making the comment that if a student was deemed ready, TSI ready in writing, and then they were able to show that they had writing skills in class, even if that class wasn't teaching writing, are you making the comment that that would be appropriate to use as a first college level course? Are you commenting that you think there should be some kind of writing, really focused writing instruction in a class that would be appropriate to use? Because I know in the reading,
Yes.
which is a little different discipline, we had the discussion that you could come in with reading skills but show your mastery of reading in other classes, such as perhaps a history course or a psychology class. And we've talked about the fact that writing is a little bit different because we have composition courses where there is a lot of focus actually on learning writing at the college level. You know, we don't have courses for learning reading at the college level, that's assumed, but this is a different type of course for writing. And are you suggesting that should be where the first college level course is awarded and not in a different course where writing is required but not part of the instruction?
Right.
Okay.
Yes. English 13, reading skills can be trained in the required literature survey courses.
Mm-hmm.
We have 2,300 level literature survey courses that students' reading skills can be tested and measured.
Mm-hmm. And those literature courses for first college level reading, if you weren't with us this morning, they're included in courses that I believe
Right.
could be included if they meet the criteria. Yeah. But you're probably looking to our next slide with writing. And so, what is your thought on those literature courses for writing? If there is a 30% of the grade is linked to writing, what would your thoughts be on that?
I think in literature courses, usually four-year colleges do not count toward writing, but simply as reading literature course.
Okay, now all that is their choice.
However,
Yeah,
1301, 1302 are writing-focused courses.
Mm-hmm.
And then professors who are teaching these courses should be trained as a specialist in writing.
Mm-hmm.
That means if a history instructor does not have time to teach writing skills, they need students who completed English 1301, 1302 to be ready to write in their classes.
Right, but remember, this measure is to see if our designations for students being ready coming in for writing, if they were appropriate. It's not to measure whether the English 1301 and 1302 are preparing students for writing later on in the curriculum.
Yeah, that's why I'm suggesting that history may count toward reading, but I suspect if whether it will count toward writing.
Thank you. So basically, you're suggesting that might not be an appropriate course. And I think you make a very good point. And right now we see, is it over 90%, Jana, I think, of the first college level courses that are being reported for writing are those English 1301 and English 1302 courses. So I think that is absolutely what's happening in practice now. I wonder if we can hear from anyone else in the field. And I'm going to move on to the possible list of courses. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for the comment. And I'm hoping that'll open the floodgates to lots of others. But I've moved to the next slide because this is really where we have those courses listed. Jana, maybe you can explain this slide, and then I want to ask a couple more questions about the literature and history courses along the lines of what you've raised.
Okay, and one thing I wanted to say that I don't remember if it's in this, but it came up with the reading, and it should be also, we believe, a part of the writing, is that TSI, students should have met TSI for writing for a first college level course to count, or for a course to count as a first college level course. So it should have a prerequisite of students meeting TSI in writing before they can enroll in the course. So if it's not a part of that course, it shouldn't count. And that was not in the proposal we sent out, but that was in feedback that we got that seemed to be more related to the reading in the proposal, but we think it should be a part of writing as well. If a course is going to count as a first college level course in writing, then students need to have met TSI in writing before they're allowed to enter that course.
Do you want me to move on to actually the revisions to the proposal portion? Maybe I jumped the gun a little bit, or actually we can work from here and continue to discuss that literature question. What I do want to say about the TSI, though, and it came up at the earlier meeting, and it's really important, and we agreed that we'd provide some clarification, is that we understand that there's a movement towards paired courses and other types of interventions in developmental education. And if you have a student who is enrolled, for example, in English 1301 as part of a paired course, that student hasn't met TSI, but basically TSI is a requirement for that course unless it's part of one of these specialty programs, because of course TSI is a requirement for those courses. If the student hasn't met, but they're taking English 1301 or 1302, for example, as part of a special paired course, and they are successful in completing that course, it can be reported as a first college level course. So when we say that that a course needs to have a TSI requirement for entry before it can be used as a first college level course, we're not saying that every single student who enters has to have met TSI. We're saying there has to be a TSI requirement, and either the student has met TSI or they're being offered some kind of an intervention or paired course or other types of support to get through the course. And if they are then successful, then yes, it absolutely can be considered that the student successfully completed the first college level course. And when we get to our discussion of learning frameworks, which I think is also built in here, we'll explain why that TSI piece is important.
Okay, well, let's look at the list of courses. Now, this is what was sent in the original proposal. Courses that always count are English 1301, 1302, or the university equivalent. And so, if a student is enrolled in English 1301, we assume that that course can count as a first college level course in writing. Courses that will count if they meet the criteria: literature courses, history courses, and courses that cannot be used: creative writing. And then if an institution wishes to use a course that's not on these lists but meets the criteria, then the institution must maintain documentation justifying the use of the course as a first college level course in writing.
Okay.
So some of the feedback that we got, and we specifically asked for feedback for the following types of courses: business writing, and though we got some mixed response, most institutions indicated that these courses should count. Learning frameworks courses, and we're going to discuss those separately, but the institutions really stated that these should not count for writing. Most indicated that they should count for reading but not writing. And then science courses, including biology, physics, and chemistry, we did get mixed responses, but most institutions stated they should not count. And then other feedback, we did get feedback that from one institution that creative writing should be allowed. And then another, that history literature courses should not count, but because writing skills were not taught. And that's, I think, the discussion we were just having.
That's correct, and we'll continue that when we get to that, I think, that next section. So why don't you talk about the learning frameworks, and then when we get to the draft revisions of the proposal, then we can go ahead and we can ask those questions about, we can delve a little more into the history and literature, but at least we'll make sure we get through the rest of this.
Okay, and so for the learning frameworks, which were there was not a lot of support for using learning frameworks for writing as a first college level course for writing, but we did want to talk about it because it's a special case. These courses are they're a special type of course. There's very little standardization with these courses, and we're concerned in using these courses as a first college level course that it could skew the measure, especially for developmental education. These courses may have the potential to create inequity with success points because of the way they're implemented at universities. But another concern or possibility is that there are a lot of new initiatives that are involving learning frameworks as a part of improving that first-year student experience and success. And first college-level course completion may be useful as a measure for those courses. So what we're really proposing is that we need to further study this before we make a decision. So we're not really saying that we're going to not use them or use them, but that we just want to study it further. And I think we're going to ask for a special, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, and I think this is probably more relevant to the reading than to the writing, because I think more people than not thought learning framework should not be a first college level writing course. So I think, that there's a sense that it's not appropriate right now. But because there was more support for including it for reading, we thought it's important to have further study, and of course we should study it in relation to both reading and writing and have the full conversation. So we're going to put together a little subgroup of this group to just spend some time talking in little more depth about the learning frameworks courses. It really varies not only in terms of the content based on the information we've received, but also some institutions require this course for all students, sometimes whether they've met TSI or not. At some institutions, this course is really just an elective that a small group of students might choose to take, and a course that's designed to spend more time in terms of the curriculum on the learning theories and the more theoretical part of the the course and course description rather than on some of the more student success focused areas like study skills, note taking, those types of things. So again, the courses really vary in terms of how they're used, in terms of the numbers of students who take them, in terms of people's approach to TSI. We've even heard them come up in relation to dual credit. So we're going to do a little more research on this end in terms of pulling data about what's being used, but we would really like some input from institutions also. So again, we're going to get together a small study group. If you're interested in participating, please email me or Jana at those email addresses that we provided on the handouts, and let us know if you're interested in a little bit about your background and maybe what your institution does in terms of learning frameworks. But again, we understand that for the writing, most of the feedback was that this course, these courses would not be appropriate.
Are there any comments or questions before we move on? Okay, then let's look at what we propose, draft revisions to the proposal. So there actually is very little. We're not proposing a lot of revision to the writing. And based on the feedback, we are removing a substantial portion of the writing must be done outside of class. So there was no general support for adding that or a similar type of requirement. The course lists, I think, are all staying the same. The one thing that's not on here that we should have added, TSI, students should be required to meet TSI in writing for that course as a prerequisite. So that should have been on this proposal, and we will add it, and we will add it to what we send out to you.
Right, and we'll put some caveats for students who are impaired courses, as we said before.
So, are there any questions or comments on this revision?
And I'd like to jump in with a couple of things then to see if I can get a little bit of feedback from you. And one is that to revisit the literature and history courses, because we didn't get to discuss that as fully as I think we should. One thing that we can talk about is we can talk about in terms of whether they should be included or not, because I really, we've had pretty much one person speak to that right now, and we did have the one comment come in. One thing we could talk about is in terms of the criteria, if English 1301 and 1302 are always going to count, would a more rigorous criteria for other courses basically serve the purpose to ensure that the type of writing is going on that that institutions think is important for something to meet a first college level course. So in other words, we talked about a 30%. Would it be important maybe to add to that, or to add something about the type of writing that is happening in those courses, such as maybe not a requirement that it be done outside of class, but such as, must include papers that are separate from tests, as opposed to just answers, essay type answers on tests, must include papers, or must include at least one paper of a certain length or something like that, because that would be a way to ensure that you're going to have the type of writing, I think, that first of all might be graded differently, because I think faculty, when they're grading tests, might not make the same comments about writing that they would if a paper were submitted. And I know we see real variety around, across faculty in terms of how much they comment on writing. But certainly we could look at it that way and think about having more rigorous requirements for courses that aren't 1301 and 1302. And the other thing I wanted to go back to is the earlier slide where some of you did write in with suggestions for, and let me see if I can find those suggestions. Yes, if you look at the feedback on the bottom of this slide, and this is the slide that's the proposal criteria for writing, and it's on page 9 for me, so if you have one per page, it might be around 17, something like that. But some of the feedback was to build in other criteria, such as students revise a percentage of the writing, course should assess writing, those types of things. Now, we had some questions about that also in terms of whether that was appropriate, because again, how much of this course should be just showing that a student has writing skills when they take their first course, because this is, again, to measure the effectiveness of our TSI writing standard in the developmental education that our students are being offered before they get to writing or while they're in writing, and how much of it should be about actually teaching writing, because they are two very different types of things. So I wanted to raise that and see if we have some comments there. Okay. Well, can I ask, is there anyone out there who does support keeping the literature and history courses with the criteria that are on the earlier slide that on the later slide? And here we go. With these criteria, which would just be the 30% of the course is based on writing, TSI would be required for that course. Students must have met TSI or be part of a paired course. Is there anyone listening who would find that appropriate, to leave literature and history, but they must meet those requirements?
Yes, this is Melissa Armitar from Lamar Institute of Technology.
Okay.
I do agree with that. All of the history courses and proposed literature courses that we are going to be doing on our campus do have a writing requirement of approximately 40%.
Okay. And is that writing as part of tests, or are papers required as part of that 40%?
These are separate papers that are required.
Okay. And so you feel that would absolutely be a course that you would show a student's readiness in writing coming in if they were successful?
Correct.
Okay. What would you say about a course that an institution offered that did not have separate papers?
I don't know that I would agree with that. I think they need to have some sort of assignment that's part of the grade that includes significant writing, that they can construct a paragraph and a sentence and use proper punctuation.
Right, and because grading a test, again, someone might be looking for the content as opposed to the whole presentation, whereas on a paper, I think I would think any faculty member, even if it's not in the English area, would expect a paper to be constructed, with strong writing. Okay, well, I'm hearing a suggestion there. Is there anyone else who would agree? That seems like kind of a compromise place that we could be, to include the literature and history, but add a component that basically says there need to be writing assignments that are separate from timed tests. And we can work on the wording for that, but in some ways it's similar to the substantial portion of the writing done outside of class, but without being that specific, so that it certainly could be in class, but it's, again, not part of a testing situation. Okay, I think that's... Okay, I have a comment from someone who's here for a yes. And again, we're going to send these proposals out to everyone in the field again, and Janet's going to go through that in a minute, so I won't say more to that, but you'll have an opportunity to respond to that. So we'll write up something along those lines and see if we can get feedback from more participants. And we have another comment here.
I do. In case 2, that some instructors may use the writing assignment as part of the testing grade, but it's still done outside of the class, then that would be permissible under the 30%?
That would be. I think the idea is that if a student's in a timed testing situation where they've got some multiple choice and they've got some short answer, if you said, well, my test, a third of it is short answer, the students are writing something, but that's not really the type of writing we mean. So I think, if anything, it's just a way to make sure that the students are doing complete writing assignments. And maybe you could do something different and say it has to be at least 2 pages worth of writing an answer to one question, so you're getting a full essay as opposed to a paragraph for a short answer, and saying, well, there's several paragraphs in answer to different questions. So that might be another approach. What do you think about that?
And we did get feedback from one institution as an example that was used by, I think, another state in establishing what counts as a writing-intensive course as a number of words. And I forget what the exact number of words was, but in the earlier stakeholder meeting that we had, I think there was there was a lot of discussion about whether a word count would be appropriate. And the answer or the feedback from that group was that no, 30% of the course grade was a better approach than a word count. But it's something to think about and consider as a possibility as well.
And I think, again, Jan, if just a word count, I mean, maybe some kind of combination of these, because just a word count could still be those type of short answers where you'd count them all up and say this is, because I think that they were maybe moving away from word count the same way that we have some people respond to the 30%, that what everyone wants to get to is there has to be a strong writing component where the students are expected to complete full writing assignments that are, complete essays, papers, etc., and not some kind of short responses, but where there's several. Would you agree that that's the message you were getting at the meeting in August? Yeah.
And so even if you're if you have comments and we would rather send them after this webinar, please send them. We will also send the proposal out for more feedback, but you're welcome to send any comments that you have immediately to us.
And I'm thinking we could craft 2 responses to try to address this, or even 3, a couple of ways that we could present sort of the same concept that I think we all agree on, but just trying to find a way to best express it. So we'll go ahead and work on that, and that way institutions will have a chance to sort of choose and say, yeah, I think this is more appropriate or worded in a way that'll make more sense in terms of how classes are taught. But I am getting the sense that folks are okay with keeping, not as they always count, but they may count if they meet the criteria, keeping those literature and history courses.
And does anyone have any comments on the creative writing? We didn't receive very much feedback, although we did receive one suggestion that it should be allowed.
And your initial group had suggested it not be allowed. Is that correct? Or from the initial meeting, did we have some discussion about that?
I don't know. I know people from the coordinating board had suggested, and we included it in the proposal for people to comment, and did not get very much response on that particular.
Yeah, and we'd had a lot of discussions about academic writing versus creative writing with staff, but and that's why it was included. I think if people had felt strongly, we would have had a stronger response. Certainly feel free, if you do have strong feeling about that creative writing course, to send a comment with this next round of revisions. But I think for now we will leave it in that courses that cannot be used category. Unless we hear otherwise, and again, when we think about crafting for those courses that maybe could be used, we may talk about academic writing to make it clear that that's we're not talking about a creative writing assignment in a history course that then you would get credit for it being a writing course. I think we will strive to send a consistent message about academic writing being the type of writing that we would require.
Are there any other comments, questions? Okay, then I guess we're almost to the end of the presentation. Here are their next steps. We will take all the feedback that we get from these sessions and send out a revised proposal for the advisory group to review, and this will be kind of a final review. Final place to give feedback, and then after we've incorporated any additional feedback, we will send out for more general input. But we wanted your input first. So.
Yes, thank you very much, and we will be meeting one last time this afternoon with the math group. So you, of course, welcome to join us if you're interested in that discussion. And again, thank you very much. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That will start at 1:30.
Anna. Yes, at 1:30 we're going to come back for math. So again, thank you all very much for joining us, and we look forward to your additional feedback on the proposals. Level course guidelines webinar for math. I will ask one more time, do we have any folks who have joined us via conference call Those would be the folks who would have the opportunity to provide feedback to us throughout the presentation. If not, we'll just continue on and hope that if someone does join us and has comments, they will make those as we move forward. Okay, well, welcome to everyone. I'm Julie Eklund. I'm Deputy Assistant Commissioner in the Planning and Accountability Division here at the Coordinating Board. I am here with Susan Brown, who's our Assistant Commissioner for Planning and Accountability, and also with Jana Cosart, who is a Program Director in our area and is coordinating the work of the First College Level Course Guidelines Stakeholder Advisory Committee. We're happy to have you with us this Friday afternoon, and we look forward to showing you the work that we have done since the group met here on August 7th. First, I want to talk a little bit about the webinar today. We did mail out the PowerPoint to everyone on the stakeholder committee as well as to all the community college liaisons. It includes a conference call number and an access code. For those of you who plan to join us that way, please be sure to put your phone on mute and not on hold for the duration of the call. If you do have a question or comment, you can change that. You can take it off mute during that time, and we do encourage you to feel free to interrupt us as we move through the process if you have any questions or comments. And if you do wish to make a comment, please share your name and institution. The webinar is being recorded for future viewing, so please be aware of that. It's also being broadcast, so if you have a comment, please understand that it will be recorded and other viewers will hear it. And if you do have any questions during the program, especially for those of you who may not have access to the conference call line or don't choose to do that, we do have a couple of email addresses. They should be up on your screen now for you to send questions. We would like you to send them to the first name to my name, Julie Eklund, at thecb.state.tx.us, since Jana does not have access to her email right now, but she is going to be taking questions as we move through and letting me know so that we're able to answer them as we go through the presentation. Without further ado, then, I would like to introduce Susan Brown, who would like to make a few comments to all of you who have joined us.
Thank you. And the reason I wanted to say something this morning was because I wanted to let you know that the work that is being done by this group is very important, not only at the state level, but we've been asked by multiple institutions to provide guidance. Also for the community colleges, this is an attempt to try and get some standardization for the points that are earned in the student success points, and they have a student success group that is working with the Texas Association of Community Colleges, the president's group, to kind of look at this and make sure that there is some equality across institutions. And so I did want to make sure that everybody was aware that this is very important work, and we really appreciate all the time and effort you have put into it at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. We're going to begin with a little bit of an overview. And for those of you who are listening in on the webinar for the third part for math, you will have heard this earlier this morning when we had the webinar for reading and writing, though I suspect that we probably have a fairly different population joining us for math. But we do want to take a few minutes to go through what the work of this group is all about, to explain first college level courses, which is a measure in our accountability system, and to just give a little background for why we're all here before we move on to the more important work, of course, of looking at the proposed guidelines and getting your feedback on that. Right now, we have 3 accountability measures that relate to developmental education. And the first one has to do with completing a first college level course in a skill area. We have 3 critical skill areas that we measure under the Texas Success Initiative, or TSI. Those are reading, writing, and math. We expect students who will come in and are going to take academic college courses to be considered ready in those areas for college level work. And our first college level course measure is a way that we look to see if in fact they were ready. Our measures actually track students who were college ready when they enroll in higher education, but they also track those students who were not college ready when they enrolled, but who eventually were determined to be college ready, so that we're able to look at the data disaggregated in those two categories. And it is very useful to look at it that way. Our first measure, as I said before, is completing a first college double course in a skill area, so that would be related to math, reading, and writing. For students who are college ready, we track this over 1 year in our accountability measure to see how many of those students complete a first college level course in 1 year. For those who weren't college ready, we track it over 3 years, because for some students who come in who need developmental education, it can take them a while to work through the remediation that's been required of them, and until they get to the point of a first college level course. So we want to give them time to get through that and then to successfully complete the college material. We also have a third measure that looks at 1 year persistence by whether a student was TSI ready when they came into higher education, or whether they needed developmental education in one or more areas. And our developmental education measures are online. We've sent the group the location for that information. It's on the Texas highereddata.org website, which is www.txhighereddata.org, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, under TSI readiness measures. I want to talk a little bit about, again, why the first college level course measure is important. It gives us some information about our TSI standards. Our standards is supposed to help us know what students are ready to enter right into college level material when they get to college. And so by looking at the success rate of students in these first college level courses, we can get some sense of if those standards are set appropriately, and also get some sense of differences in students across populations in terms of their performance. But it also, as I mentioned before, provides information about those students who require developmental education, about how they're doing after they complete their developmental education requirements and move into college level courses. And one thing we'll talk a little bit about this afternoon is the fact that, the world of developmental education is changing out there, and most of you should be aware of that we have a lot of new interventions, a lot of new innovation that's happening in Texas, including paired courses, non-course based options. So sometimes we have students who enter first college level courses who have not met TSI. But we'll talk about that a little bit in terms of how that relates to our proposal for first college level course completion. But the bottom line on that is we're going to be looking at courses where there's a TSI requirement for entry in terms of mapping our first college level courses. But if a student is entering into one of those courses as part of a paired course, because they've got some kind of because they've got some kind of other developmental education that's supporting them, like an NCBO, those college level courses will still be able to count. Okay, so let me move on to briefly talk about reporting. Institutions report to us a first college level course. It's very important to get that information correct, since it is used for several things, including research and, of course, success points, which Susan mentioned. Institutions have discretion in terms of what courses are going to count. And right now we are working to provide guidelines. We're not working to provide requirements, although moving forward it's possible that at some point community colleges might make a decision that they want to adopt the guidelines across the board. But we're just talking about guidelines. We're not talking about requirements. So institutions now can make other decisions than what is in the guidelines. But again, it's very helpful for everyone to follow. It's very helpful for institutions to know what the guidelines are, understand what the purpose of these measures are, and I think to have that information. And I did want to mention, some people might remember way back when we had TASP, we did provide a list of courses, but we right now haven't published guidelines or courses, and we're moving towards, of course, doing that with these guidelines. Institutions frequently request guidelines from us. A lot of times it'll be reporting officials or other administrators who want to know, what are other folks doing? What do you suggest? What's most appropriate for us to be using? So it's very helpful for us to get feedback from institutions and be able to provide some kind of consistent guidelines for institutions who aren't sure what is most appropriate here. Again, I think equity and shared understanding, when you're looking at the measures online and the percentage of students who have met first college course requirements, if everyone has a shared understanding of the types of courses or criteria that are used for determining those courses, then the measures make more sense. It's easier to compare them across the board. And of course, in terms of success points, you have more equity in terms of the institutions are getting points for the same courses or types of courses that meet the same criteria. I'm not going to talk a lot about the first college level course reporting, but there is an item if we do have any reporting officials who are participating, because I know we do have a couple on the stakeholder group. There is an item on our CBM OOS report that asks institutions to report the first college level course. A few key things. One is that only courses that are graded and where students receive an A, B, or C are included here. So if a student is not successful, the first college level course is not reported to us as a first college level course. If it's a pass-fail course, that's not included. So we're really looking for students who have earned an A, B, or C. And there's an option to report a course as a reading or writing intensive, and we're not going to talk about that during this session. We're going to talk about math, but we did have questions about that earlier. So for reading and writing intensive courses, for example, a history course that meets both requirements, then an institution could report it as both. In terms of success points, a student earns, or an institution earns 1 success point for a student who successfully completes the math first college level course, and 0.5 point each for reading and writing. So they'd earn 1 point for a course that was both reading and writing intensive. We have an example of our reports here. We shared these with everyone who came for the meeting in August for this advisory group meeting, and we just wanted to show again that we do track first college level course measures online by institution. We track them for 1, 2, and 3 years, so that institutions can track their progress in terms of how students are doing on this measure. When we had our meeting in August, we had a good range of participation, I think. We had developmental education faculty, academic course faculty. We had faculty from a range of disciplines, so we could discuss some different types of courses and whether they might be appropriate or not. We had administrators, we had reporting officials, we had curriculum specialists, and we had a lot of faculty. It was most heavily faculty, which was, of course, appropriate for this group. We also had a range of institutions, including some of our community colleges, our state technical colleges, and our Lamar institutions. We also allowed at least one representative. Any institution that put in a nomination, we allowed at least one representative from that institution, and in many cases two or three. So every institution had the opportunity to send someone and provide feedback. Okay, so let's move on to the meat of why we're here, and that's to look at the draft proposal and the feedback that was provided to us. So the way this worked is after the meetings that we had in August, staff got together with all of the notes and the comments. We filled a lot of flip chart sheets up with comments. We went through and we decided that the best way to ask for responses was to synthesize the material and come up with some kind of a proposal that you could react to and send comments to. Rather than just sort of a mixed bag of comments and notes. It made the most sense, and generally, if you recall, we structured the meetings that way to try to guide you towards some kind of a proposal. So it wasn't too challenging to take what everyone had done and kind of fit it into one group proposal. But there were still some questions and some things we weren't able to sort through, and we, of course, had promised to get it back for comment. So we sent that out to all of the advisory group members and the community college liaisons on September 9th. And asked for comments back in about 3 weeks. Then we took those comments when we received them, and we tried to build them into some proposed guidelines and some changes to our proposed guidelines in terms of moving forward. For math, we did a little differently than reading and writing, and we put together a couple of charts. So I want to walk you through that and talk about some of the issues that arose as we were working through the math issues. Some of the decisions were very easy and very clear. We got very clear clear guidance from the committee, and there were other issues that weren't as clear, where folks had different opinions, and that's where we're going to spend most of our time today. We also took the recommendations to staff, including staff in our workforce and academic affairs area, so they were able to provide some comments on the proposals, and that was especially helpful as we were looking at some of the WECM courses and related to the math requirement. Okay, so here's a little bit of information about where we are with this. In terms of the type of program, for any type of program where there is a math requirement, pretty much everyone on the committee was in agreement, and that's true for the two separate subcommittees that met, and then when the committee met all together, and also in terms of folks who sent back comments to our proposal. And everyone was agreed that students who are in a degree program or a certificate program which required math, which had a math course requirement, those students, the course that should be reported as the first college level course for math should be a math course, and we'll get into details about what that means, but should be a course that is, we will consider a math course rather than, for example, a science course. And we've got a little breadth with that, but again, we'll talk to that and we'll speak to that in a moment. So for reporting first college level courses in math, for students who have one of those math course requirements, that's what's reported. Where it gets a little stickier, a little more complicated, is those applied associate's degrees or level 2 certificates where math is not a requirement. There's a key thing to understand for these students, because many folks have said, well, if math is not a requirement, why would you be reporting a first college level math course? Well, the reason is because TSI is required for math for students to enter those programs. They have to have met the TSI math requirement before they can move into the college level material in those courses. So math is really considered a foundation for those programs. The other thing I think is important to understand is for the level 2 certificates or for the applied associates, in order to meet SACS requirements, SACS Gen Ed requirements, a student must take an academic math or natural science course. So this would be an ACGM course for those programs. So it's important to remember that although we do not have a specific math requirement, we do have a Gen Ed, if you want to call it a distribution requirement, that a student must choose a math or a natural science course for that, and we're going to get back to that point in a few minutes. Okay, so let's talk through the proposed guidelines. We're going to first talk through what we presented to you, and then we're going to talk through a couple of different options that we came up with based on the feedback that we received. So again, what I first talked about in terms of the chart, for those students where an academic math course is required, what is proposed is that 1,000 and 2,000 level ACGM math courses or lower level university math courses will be the courses that are allowable to report for a first college level course. And any ACGM 1,000 or 2,000 level math course could be included, or any university math course could be included. In addition to that, and we'll call this under the math umbrella, though they might not fall under a math rubric in terms of reporting the courses. In addition to that, there was one math-related course in the ACGM that we included, and that's Psych 2317, and that's the statistics course. And we also are including any university lower division statistics courses that may be in social studies, economics, or business. So again, the Psych 2317, and I know at the meeting we talked about including any statistics or quantitative classes in the ACGM. That's the only one that doesn't fall under math, unless we've missed it, in which case please do send us information. But in terms of the university folks, we have the courses in social science, economics, and business for statistics, and if they're truly a statistics course, and I think it's pretty clear from those course title which courses fall into that category, then it's acceptable. We did find in looking at the lower division courses for universities, looking through the course inventories, that there are some quantitative analysis courses also. So those courses may also be included. So again, pretty straightforward. You can use all of these you can't use anything else for the students who have a math requirement as part of their college programs. When you see feedback there, again, there were no objections to this. We did have a comment that these should align with the New Mathways project courses, and I wanted to point out that all of the New Mathways courses are in the ACGM. I believe there's a contemporary math, the statistics, and the college algebra that they're working with that. So there's nothing that New Mathways is doing that is not included in the ACGM, and as I said before, everything from the ACGM math courses will be included here, as well as that psych statistics course. Okay, so let's get into what some of the issues are that we need to talk about for the courses for which math is not a requirement. And again, you'll see across the top is pretty much reported again what we talked about before. If math is required, it's included. But we do have this issue for applied associates and level 2 certificates where there isn't a math requirement. Okay. Let's talk about the options for how to deal with that. And we've put a couple of proposals out there. In fact, three different ones. We'd appreciate some feedback, either if we have anyone on the line, or for those who are listening, if you want to send an email, that would be appreciated. We will also send these options out to the groups if we don't get a clear consensus today. And since I don't think we have too large a group with us this afternoon, we'll be sure to do that. So the first option when math and science is required is for institutions to report the math or natural science course that is being used to fulfill that academic program requirement. So because the student is required to take a math or science course, there is going to be a course available to report to that student. I think that the approach to this in terms of thinking about our measure is that the TSI is required for math, so the student has some foundation in quantitative analysis, and whether the student moves on to a math course or a science course, the foundation is there, and there should be an opportunity for institution to report whatever follows in terms of what's closest to math. And what we would suggest here, if a student chooses to take more than one math or science course, because certainly there are some level 2 certificates where there might be more required courses or where the student might be interested in doing more, then we would create a prioritized list. So for example, if the student took a math and a science, we would ask that you report the math as the first college level course, so we can actually, if they were received an A, B, or C. If the student took a science and took a physics and took a biology, on the priority list we'd probably put physics first and then have biology. But again, we would create this list for all of you on the committee to give us feedback. But that way we would have the course that perhaps has the most math application, but we would have some course, because I think the way TSI was structured, there was a decision that it is useful and important for students to have those high school math skills and have a certain level of math skills, quantitative and analysis skills, moving into college where there's any kind of academic math or science requirement. Okay, so the advantages of this approach, and we're going to talk about all three and talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages. I think this is very straightforward. If this is all that's allowed, it'll be very easy for institutions to say, yep, the student's required to take that. Yes, they completed it. We're going to report it as the first college level course. So if they need to have it for the program, they're not going to complete their degree without it. So it would be very, very straightforward. It is related to academic coursework. So because TSI is all about students' readiness and preparedness for academic freshman level college coursework, it makes sense to have academic coursework be what's used to measure student readiness, whether they were ready or not for that academic coursework. So that's very logical. I think you're going to see more consistency across programs if we use this rather than getting into WECM courses in terms of the mathematical background. Again, easy for institutions to implement. Reporting officials would just have to know, yes, one of these courses that they're required to take. The data would show when students get through that, so in some ways it might be helpful for tracking students in these certificate programs about how are they doing with their academic coursework. Did they meet that math science requirement that we were saying they had to be ready for in terms of TSI? And then the final thing, I'm not sure that this is an advantage that would make it easier for institutions. It's what a lot of institutions are doing now. It's what I advise if people call and say, hey, I've got someone who I've had to meet TSI and they're not taking a math course they're taking, but they have to, of course, take some kind of science in that case. I suggest that they do report that as their first college level course. So that's what current practice has been and what we have been advising, which isn't a reason necessarily to continue that way, but that is how we have been approaching it when asked. And again, a reminder: the institutions right now make the decision in terms of what first college level course to report. Okay, let's look at the next option. Okay, so option 2. And again, these options are just in instances where a student is required to take math or science. If a student's required to take math, so any bachelor's degree seeking student, any academic associate student, they're going to be required to take math. But if they're required to take math or science, here's a second option. And this would be to create a list of math criteria and then report any course that meets that criteria. The criteria could include ACGM math or science courses or WECM technical math courses. It could be a criteria where some of the ACGM science courses would fit the criteria, other science courses might not, a case where a biology or a zoology might not fit the requirement, or an astronomy. I'm not sure I know all the ACGM science courses. The advantages of this, and I want to get back again with this, I want to mention the fact that this is not going to apply to universities, any of these options, because all of those students are, unless the university offers an applied associate's or certificate, and we have a few of them out there that do, unless they offer that, these are not going to be options because all of the students will be expected to do math. Okay, so again, with option 2, it would be a situation where a list of criteria would be created. Did I hear a question? I thought I heard something. This will allow institutions to report courses in which students demonstrate math skills. So it'll be tied back to math skill criteria rather than just these courses will be allowed. If they're in your program, they're allowed, as with the first option. So it will allow institutions more flexibility in terms of what they can and might choose, as opposed to the first option where it'll be very clear this is what you will be reporting. One challenge with this approach is that you could have a student who is required to do the program as required to meet TSI and be college ready in math, and you won't be able to report that student as successfully completing a first college level course if the science course they choose does not meet the criteria and they don't have any WECM courses that would meet the criteria that were laid out. So that would be a challenge there. Another challenge might be if WECM courses were included, I think we'd have to have a discussion about students who are not seeking level 2 certificates but are seeking other certificates. What WECM courses may or may not be appropriate to report for those students. And I think that's a separate discussion that probably needs to be had. Right now we're focusing on students who are required to meet TSI and not those for whom TSI is waived. Though I will say that we do in our DevEd measures track outcomes for unknown students, and that's where we include students who are waived or have, for example, a military exemption. Okay, the final option is basically a combination of options 1 and 2. So that an institution, if a student has taken, an institution may choose to report the course that the student's taken to meet their SACS, Gen Ed, academic math science course requirement. The institution can choose to do that and report any math science course there, or they could choose to look at WECM courses and look at a list of criteria and use that criteria to select another course. So they might say, well, they took a biology course, but instead I'm going to report a technical mathematics course from the WECM. And I think we did send out a list of some of those technical math courses just as an example. So that would be the third step. So let me now spend a little bit of time talking about the feedback that we received, some other feedback that might tie into these 3 options, and then we'll go back to the options briefly. Okay. We did receive some feedback, and thank you all very much for providing that. In fact, we had one institution that very kindly went through all of the WECM courses that they offer and showed which of those courses actually had learning outcomes that would tie back to math. And that was very interesting to be able to see that and see the types of things that were there, and the level of rigor varied, but it was important, I think, to look at that. that, and that's the type of thing, if we go with option 2 or 3, institutions will need to do, is look at actually whether something meets criteria, not just are there learning outcomes that tie to math, but do they then meet criteria. We did have people send us possible criteria to use in terms of determining a math course. And again, this would be an option that would be used if we go with option 2 or 3. If we simply decide that the academic math or science course is to be used, then this won't be an issue. But if we did want to establish criteria, here's an example of some things that were sent. And Jana, do you remember were these from the college career readiness standards? These, or was it? Okay, and I'm not sure if the person who sent it.
I believe so.
You believe so? Thank you. I was going to say I wasn't sure if the person who sent it identified it, but I believe they were. So one is students will gather and assess information relevant to a question, will analyze, evaluate, and synthesize information, develop, interpret, and express ideas through written communication, and understand key mathematical concepts and the application of appropriate quantitative tools to everyday experience. Now, obviously, we'd have to expect the course to meet all of these because some of these learning outcomes could be linked to pretty much any course in terms of expressing ideas, analyzing, evaluating, synthesizing information. So this would be in relation to quantitative information, and the EQS one would be an important component. So this is just an example that someone sent. It's not something that we're saying we need to use, but I wanted to show that, people were sending us some criteria. We could spend a little more time, and if any of you have any other criteria you'd like to recommend, if you are going to recommend the option 2 or 3, it would be extremely helpful for you to give us some sense of what criteria you think would be best to link to that, because that's going to be an important piece of this. We also had suggestions, and we'll talk about this a little bit. There were some suggestions that came in, and we had more of them with the reading and writing, but we did have some for math also that we and this is a little bit different. We did have some suggestions that we asked that we go to our WECM and ACGM committees and ask them to change learning outcomes, or that learning outcomes be changed to fit what's needed for this. And I wanted to point out that is not the task of this committee, and that we don't have the authority to change those types of things. But we're welcome. We're happy to go to those committees and let them know what we're working on. And we did have someone, in the case of math, suggest that we go to the WECM Leadership Committee and the ACGM Committee and the Undergraduate Education Advisory Committee and just ask if they had any input on these. So certainly we will be showing these proposals to those committees, I believe, as we move forward, and maybe not at a meeting, but certainly in terms of sharing them with the members when we distribute them more broadly to leadership. So we will definitely seek input from those folks, but we need to work within the structure that we have now, just in terms of developing the guidelines. Again, the committee's role isn't to change the ACGM, to add courses, to change learning outcomes, though if someone wanted to make recommendations to those committee members, they could. So there were some comments along those lines. So I wanted to share that feedback. And the fact that we developed these 3 different proposals. Again, I'm not sure we have anyone who's called in on the conference line, but I do think we have some folks who are listening in over the internet. So for those of you who are on the committee or anyone else who's listening, please do send us any comments that you have on these proposals in terms of the options for students who aren't required to take math. We will share this. We will share this material again with the advisory group first. We'll send it out one more time to get any feedback, especially now that we've sort of developed these options out of the recommendations that came in. So it would be very helpful if you could just let us know which makes the most sense to you, and we'll share them. And then once we get that feedback, we'll go ahead and adjust our proposals. Maybe they'll just need tweaking. Maybe they'll need a little more adjustment. But then we'll include just the one option, unless the decision is that we really don't have a consensus, and then we'll include more than one. And then we'll send it out to general input to institutional leadership. Again, we can send it to members of our committees. And try to get some sense from the overall community if they're on board with the recommendations. So that's in a nutshell the work that we've done on the math first college level course guidelines. In some ways, I might take it as a positive thing that we don't have too many. Oh, we did just have a comment come in on email. Good. Go ahead.
We do have a question
Okay.
and then a comment. So we're going to go back to the question first.
Good.
And I believe this relates to the course list for math.
Okay. And if you go to page, I think it's about slide 15. We didn't actually include the list. We did send a list out of all the ACGM courses when we sent these materials. We don't have it in the PowerPoint, but we did send that. So,
But the question was about whether that it mentions universities in the one place, but does it hold for CTCs too?
Well, for CTCs, a course would have to be in the ACGM, so that if you had one of those unique needs courses, that could not be included. So the proposal was that the course would have to be one of the math courses or that psych stats course in the ACGM, any of the math courses, or that the psychology statistics course. Any of those could be used for a first college level course, but any other math courses could not be used, and no WECM courses could be used if the student had a math requirement for their degree, an academic math requirement for their degree. So I hope that answers the question.
We also, I just got an email that the phone is not working, which may be why we haven't heard a whole lot over the phone. So.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, for some reason we didn't get our phones up and running. If we have, there may be someone who wants to get through if they want to try again. Let's go ahead and put those numbers up. I'm not sure. And Jana, do we want to check with the technical folks out back and see? We have people who are manning the technology here if they have anything to add. Here is the information about the phone number. And let me just read it to everyone if someone wants to try again. 1-877-873-8017, and then type in the access code 865-3354.
But the comment says that when they try, it says that the host has not arrived. So it may be...
So the host has not signed in. Okay. Well, I think maybe Sue did it this morning. Okay. Well, we're going to see what we can do because we really want your comments, and so we'll see if we can get everyone back online, but feel free to email them until now, and in some ways this might have worked out. You had a chance to hear our side of it, and now we'll have some time for you to give us your side. So Susan Brown just went to see if we can get logged in. And I'm going to look at another question now that came in on email. Okay, the comment we had is that the Psych 2317 doesn't provide the basic quantitative and empirical skills needed in terms of meeting the college level course requirement in math. Now, the comment also has to do with TSI being a minimum expectation in all areas for the college level student. And as you know, many institutions just expect TSI to be met in math for students to enroll in college-level math courses. So the state does not have a requirement that students meet in all areas in order to take the college-level math courses. However, as we move forward, if a student has met the requirement in math, an institution can't set a higher standard, as many of you are aware, in terms of enrollment into the college level math courses. Science is a little bit different because I think, and I'll probably defer to our developmental education staff on this rather than say more right now, but of course science is a little bit different in terms of the discipline, and it would be good to get their feedback in terms of the expectations for TSI and reading for those courses. But certainly for math courses, meeting TSI and reading and writing has not been a requirement, and students who meet the standard to enroll in the math courses may not be required to take developmental education. So again, as we move forward with some of these new policies, because that was a change in rule, it will really be very important for us to collect this information about how students perform in their first college level courses, and therefore it'll be important to make some good choices about those courses so that we're able to see, hey, this policy has changed in terms of student student success, changed, our rates of student success. It's made a difference in terms of what kind of outcomes we're seeing for students. And so, again, we appreciate that feedback. And if anyone else feels that about the psych statistics course, and I hope I included the proper rubric and number. I'm pretty sure that statistics course is there. That is what the committee recommended in our group meeting, that we include that psych statistics course. I don't think there was any argument at the time, and we didn't have any challenge in terms of comments. But thank you for raising that. If anyone else feels strongly that that shouldn't be included, please let us know. In terms of the other courses mentioned, they are not math courses, but they may be courses that might be considered for students who do not have the math requirement. And this person mentions economics, accounting, and business majors, so those types of courses. And this is from a community college, Jana? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, and this is from a community college, this comment. So again, that's something new that we've heard, that we didn't hear from the math group meeting, where there was pretty much consensus that it should be a math course and not another course. We can look again. Now, we did look at all of the ACGM courses. We'll go back and look again at the business and economics courses, but the economics courses did not have the math focus at that level. Now, we did find some university economics courses where it was clearly there were a lot of mathematical components at that level. And that's why, in terms of looking at the university courses, we were looking at courses with quantitative skills or statistics, and those are allowable for universities. Okay. And we're going to stay on until we're able to try to get this phone going, but if anyone else wants to email a question, we've got the email addresses there. If there are any specific courses, that's the other thing. Rather than just sending lists of general courses, it would be very helpful to us if there's courses that aren't included that you believe should be. Please send us the specific course descriptions, because that's very important in areas like economics or business. Obviously, there's a wide variety of courses. So if there are courses in the ACGM, in terms of community colleges, where there would be a math requirement, please send that. And I think we can, again, if those courses are allowable for a student to use to meet the math or science requirement under SACS, then they would, under the first and the third proposal, they would automatically be included in terms of courses you could use to report the first college level course. If the second or third proposal comes through, if we have a list of criteria and they meet those criteria, then those courses would be allowable. So that's actually a good way to help explain the different types of courses. Okay, here we have another question. Thank you all for participating this way, and we're still working on the phones. The question is, and let me bring my computer over here. Let's see if we can see it. Okay, how are we planning to address success measures for degree-seeking versus certificate students? What will happen if a student receives first college level course completion as a certificate student and then switches to a degree-seeking student and goes on to complete a math course? Okay, once a first college level course has been reported, additional courses should not be reported for a student. And that's especially important now that we have success points. An institution can't earn additional success points for a student if they've gotten a success point for that student completing a first college level course. This may be a very good argument for including those academic courses only as the first college level course, because if you have a certificate student who then changes their mind, you might want to actually measure their readiness in terms of TSI and moving forward with an academic course, and rather than a technical course, which may not be the final course that they take. But we do not allow, because I think, again, you'd have some inequities there, we don't allow institutions to report students, and sometimes they do report them, but we won't count more than two. I'm sorry, we won't count two or more. We will only count one first college level course per area. So, an institution will be allowed to report one for reading, one for writing and one for math, or one combined for reading and writing, which would earn, of course, the full point instead of half point each that we have for reading and writing, and then for math. We also had the issue come up earlier in the day. I think it was during the writing seminar, maybe it was the reading, when we were talking about level 1 certificate students, and someone said, well, what about level 1 certificate students in first college level courses? Well, level 1 certificate students, and I guess I mentioned earlier, they do not have to meet TSI requirements, but the agency's actually looking at that. And we actually have someone down here now who I think is about to get us set up for our phone call. Yes, she nodded yes. So we should have the phones going soon. Have another question coming in from Ben.
Available
Fox?
commands, press *#.
Okay, and you can hear we're about to get set as the host. We were set this morning, and someone must have logged us off. Yes, hi, I'm starting to hear folks out there now. Welcome. It's nice to know there's people out there. I was afraid there wasn't too much interest. Okay, now I have a question here that came in from a state technical college, and please do put your phones on mute, because now I'm getting some background noise. So if you tried to call in, if you could put your phone on mute, and I hear that sound is diminishing, so that's good. Okay, the question is for Associates of Applied Science students, AAS students, who do not have a Gen Ed core of 15 SCH, using option 1 seems to be the most straightforward. Okay? For certificate students, certificate 2, so that's level 2 certificate students, who don't have a Gen Ed core requirement, then TECM classes, or so the technical math classes or other WECM courses, would be sufficient. Okay, so this is feedback. Okay, we also have feedback that chemistry and physics would be appropriate. There were questions about biology at this institution, and they also had questions about engineering courses and whether they could be used for the first college level math. So we probably do need to take a little bit of time and look at those engineering courses. Now, I think we've got a few people online. Is there some agreement that it would be appropriate to use engineering courses? Maybe they're trying. You are able to call in now if you'd like. And we got this information about the engineering courses. These are engineering graphics courses that I see to start with. And in fact, it's 2 engineering graphics courses. So engineering graphics 1 or 2. And I think this course may be the type of situation that requires college algebra right now. It might be the type of situation where an institution might say they would prefer option 2 for those types of courses. So I think this email might be suggesting that perhaps option 1 would work for some situations for a level 2 certificate or AAS student, and generally an AAS student, but there might be a situation we'd want to bring in option 2 and the WECM courses. So thank you. That's good feedback to have. And that's the type of feedback that we hope to have when we send out these options for folks in the field to take a look at. And again, thank you. This is a great email because it sends the specific course, so we're able to take a look at the course. And as we get criteria, as more criteria are sent to us, we'll be able to match them against some of the courses that are sent and be able to see, yes, are there matches here, or are we not seeing many courses which really match to the type of criteria that we've been sent? So that is helpful. It's challenging. It's funny with the math because we've got something very straightforward we can do on the one hand for those students who are required to take math, but it does get very complicated for the students who don't, or it can get, let's put it that way, it can get very complicated. Or again, we could have the more straightforward option 1. Okay, let me see if I think we might have had some other questions come in. Okay, we were asked to elaborate on non-ACGM requirement on science courses, how 8 weeks and mini-semester courses will be reported. Okay, and this is, again, from a community college. If a course is not in the ACGM, right now the way these proposals are written, the course cannot be used for a first college level course requirement related to math. Okay, so again, we're talking about students who are required to do TSI in math to meet TSI, but aren't required to take a math course, and at least when the committee met, their agreement was it should be a course that's in the ACGM, because if that is the case, then we have some consistency. We know the courses that are being reported. It's not some kind of a unique need course that might not fit the measure as well. And then again, you've got some kind of consistency across the state in terms of an understanding. When we look at this data, we know the courses that are allowable and are not, because we can go into the ACGM and look and see what those courses are. Now, of course, that's going to be true for community colleges, for universities. There's a little more flexibility, but again, the committee decided to focus strictly on math, so it'll be just the university lower division math courses, or those math courses that have a large math component. Now, they were discussing just statistics and quant. We've had a couple emails that might suggest otherwise, but that was the committee's recommendation. So please do send comments if you don't agree. And now I've got another comment coming in. Does the institution report the student's first successful attempt at their college math course, even if they attempted this course once before and made and failed the course? I'm actually very glad you sent this question, because it allows me to talk a little bit about our data collection and our ability to track student movement through the system. In the summer of 2011, we began collecting data on a report called the CBM-00S, which is the Student Schedule Report. And that report actually provides us with specific course level data for every student. So you think about the information that would be on a student's transcript, the courses that they took, the course sections, the course numbers, the grade they received. We were able to collect all that information on our CBM-00S report. So the beauty of that is that if we would like to track students and see how they're performing in specific courses, including issues like how many students are failing the first time they attempt college algebra, or how many students are withdrawing the first time they attempt statistics. We're able to do that, and in fact, we have done that. We've provided that type of information to folks working on new Mathways and other projects, and I'm also happy to share that for anyone else who might be interested. So we do, in fact, have that type of information. We don't have that information in terms of our first college level course report, because the way it's worked in the past is institutions generally didn't report to us if a student attempted the course unless they passed it. We did have some in the past. Our measures showed students who attempted and then the percent that passed, but we realized institutions were waiting until they got that A, B, or C to tell us, yeah, they've completed this. So when we moved to the CBM-00S in terms of reporting first college level course, we collect a record for every course a student takes, and then in that record, the institution will flag, yes, this is a course that was the first college level course, and they're only allowed to report it if a student got an A, B, or C. So in many ways, the answer to your question is we don't collect attempts. It's yes and no. We don't collect attempts in terms of the first college level course. We only collect success, but we do have all of that very rich background information, so we're able to go and look for specific courses. And what's wonderful about that is we're going to be able to go and look and see exactly what institutions are reporting for first college level course once we have the new guidelines, and look at student performance. And we might see that there's certain courses that we think might not necessarily fit, in which case we might ask the institutions, hey, do you have documentation for why you included this? And in fact, that's one piece that we talked a lot about with the reading and writing courses, the importance of documentation. If we do move to an option where the institutions are making a decision about what can be included instead of a sort of a general sweeping, you can use anything in the ACGM type decision for those students who aren't required to take math. If we do move to that, it'll be important for institutions to document their process of making a determination if a course met the criteria, and to keep a list and I think these things become more important as we have success points and there is funding that is tied to this measure. So I did want to mention that, but thank you. That was a very good question. And if institutions ever have information that they're interested in learning about specific courses statewide, obviously your IR offices will have information about student performance at your institution in specific courses. But if there's ever interest in information statewide, please do let us know. And again, we have tracked the types of things like how students have performed, and all of the first college level math courses like statistics and contemporary math and algebra. We're able to see withdrawals, incompletes, A's through F's, pass fail, all that type of information, and it really is very informative, and it's the type of thing we'll be looking at for first college level courses. Okay, I think that's the end of the questions that have come in over email. Again, thank you all very much for those. Any other questions or comments, do feel free to send them to me or to Jana, or even better, send them to both of us, but we'll of course share them. I want to talk a little bit about our next steps. Again, I think I mentioned before that we will put a proposal together. We will email it to the group, to the advisory group and the liaisons for one more set of comments back, unless there's something that clearly we need to talk through a little bit more. And then we're going to send that information to the broader higher education community and let folks provide their feedback on that. So unless we have any other comments, and I do want to apologize. I'm very sorry that we didn't realize that we didn't have the phone call set up, and we just didn't get an email about it until fairly along in the process. So I apologize that we weren't able to get you linked in through the phone, but I think this worked pretty well, at least in terms of presenting what we have, what you'll be seeing at your institutions. Thank you very much for the comments that were emailed. And Janet, do you have anything you want to add in terms of next steps?
No. I think that is it. We'll send a follow-up very shortly after this meeting with the links and PowerPoints. You should have gotten the PowerPoints, but if anybody didn't, you can send us an email. Here is our contact information.
Yes, and actually I did have one final question came in. I guess we did say we'd go for a while. And this is, does the first college level course credit hours matter? And what we have said is, of course, we'll have to be at least 3 semester credit hours. And I don't know if did we build that into the math? I think we built it into the reading and writing, and we discussed it for the math. So the discussion was, if it's at least 3 semester credit hours or more, it can be reported as a first college level course. But if you've got a 1 or 2 semester credit hour course, that should not be included. And I think we do want to be consistent across the 3 disciplines, the reading, writing, and math, for that particular element of this. Thank you for that question. Glad to know there's many of you out there. Okay, well, last chance, and again, we're happy to answer questions one-on-one. I don't think our phone numbers are there, but if you'd like to just email and say, hey, can we set up a time to chat? Oh, apparently the phone is still not working, so I'm not quite sure what's going on with that. But you're welcome to send me an email, and I'll send back my phone number if you'd rather do that, and I can actually provide it now. It's 512-427-6533. So if you do have a question or a comment about the webinar this afternoon, feel free to call. Again, I'm sorry we had our phone difficulties, and we look forward to hearing your next set of comments on the proposal.
And you should have my phone number from the email that was originally sent out with all of this.
That's right. We are relying on all of you to help us put together. Okay. Thank you, Susan. Did you have anything to add?
I don't, and I appreciate everybody's time and work on this project, and we will continue to try and send out the information and get more feedback from you so that we can move forward as one big group.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.